Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Torah class, weekly portion Torah class. This week we study actually two portions combined. Israel in the Holy Land, they are reading one portion ahead of us because the holiday of Shavuot, which fell about a month ago, fell on Friday and Shabbat. In Israel, they celebrate only one day holiday. So the second day we celebrated Shavuot and read a different portion, the portion for Shavuot, while in Israel they read the weekly portion. So there was a discrepancy. If you travel to Israel, hopefully soon you'll be able to. During that period, you would be looking for a minion of foreigners that read one portion behind. When do we got to get together in this week's portion? They are studying the portion of Balak. We are studying this week two portions combined, Chukat and Balak. Together, it makes 1 week portion, and this way we are able to continue in the same path. So this week's portion is loaded and loaded with teachings, and I would like to choose just few, and hopefully you will enjoy. The beginning of the portion talks about the red heifer. Very briefly, the red heifer is a commandment that makes no sense from the beginning till the end. It is the epitome of God's commandment that cannot be comprehended. Even a part of it cannot be comprehended. And it involves purifying anyone who comes in contact with a dead human being, with a dead body, under this being, living or being, finding oneself under the tent with a dead body, coming in direct contact, carrying, sitting on, touching. The person becomes ritually impure for 7 days. A ritually impure is not a sin and it's not bad. There is no punishment. However, if the person wants to enter the holy temple yard or wants to partake in a sacrifice, an offering that is considered God's offering, God's meal, it must be ritually pure. In addition, a Kohanim, the Kohen family, our commandment to always be pure, ritually pure, and they are the exception to the rule where becoming impure is a sin. That's why you will not find a Kohen who is part of the Cheva Kadisha, because Cheva Kadisha is the group of men and women, respectively, who deal with the human corpse, preparing it for burial, and a Kohen is not allowed to be in that room, in that building for that matter, definitely not touch a dead corpse. Also, that's the reason that Kohen families will bury their dead at the outset of the cemetery, right by the entrance, so they might be able to visit their loved ones without committing a sin of coming in contact with a dead corpse. If the man who is a Kohen is buried in the middle of the cemetery for the family to attend funeral and visit whenever the time calls for, whenever they desire, is not going to be easy. Therefore, by burying him right by the entrance, they are able to stand near the grave without coming in contact or too close to another dead person. This in general is the law of dead corpse. Now, in order for one to get purified, to be able to enter, as I mentioned, they have to count for 7 days. After 7 days, a red heifer, a young cow or bull, a young cow that was born and has not done any work and is completely 100% red, without more than one single hair that's black or white, which is very rare and very unusual. It is actually 5 years ago, I just searched this week on YouTube, type red heifer in Lakewood, New Jersey. There is a Jewish farmer, a son of a Holocaust survivor, who had a red heifer born in his farm, and the rabbis came to inspect it, and they actually agreed that it is a kosher red heifer. So it does happen, but it's very rare. The red heifer is slaughtered as a sacrifice. However, it's been slaughtered as a sacrifice outside the temple. And after it's dead, the animal is burned to ashes. The ashes are mixed with water from the temple. The holy temple stood on top of a river, a small stream of water that would flow under the floor. There was a stream. They would be able to take out water from there, mix it with the red heifer ashes, and then a priest will sprinkle the red heifer, we call it the red heifer ashes, over those who are impure, thus purifying them. This in general is the story or the law of red heifer. How many red heifers were made throughout history? Here we go. That's the point. That's the discussion that I would like to share with you. So I should say that according to Jewish law, the first one was created by Moses. He purified the Jewish people with the red heifer, but part of it had to be remaining for the duration of the history, and it was there until the second holy temple. And always any new red heifer that they used, they had to have some of it from the original one that Moses created. This was part of God's commandment that the red heifer that Moshe does should continue on to purify, to be part of the red heifer purifying the Jewish people. Here is Maimonides sharing with us how many red heifers there have been. I'm reading on page 993, if you have the Chumash. We are reading, it is involving the chapter 19, verses 14 to 22. This is pretty much the part of the red heifer law. Rambam, Maimonides, he says, 9 red heifers were prepared from the time this mitzvah was given until the destruction of the second temple. There was a total of 9 red heifers used throughout history that span over 1,000 years. The first was prepared by Moshe, the second by Ezra. Ezra was the man that rebuilt the second temple by coming back from Babylon, from Assyria to Israel, with permission from the Babylon king, and he purified everyone who entered the Holy Land and rebuilt the temple. And there were 7 from Ezra to the destruction of the temple. During the second Holy Temple that lasted for 430 or 20 years, there were 7 more red heifers that were burned and used. So it's a total of 9. The 10th will be made by King Mashiach. May he be speedily revealed. Amen. May this be your will. That's Rambam. Rambam says number 10 will be prepared by King Mashiach, by Messiah. May he be revealed speedily. Amen. May this be your will. The Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, has a problem with a prayer in Jewish law. After all, the Torah, the Rambam, Maimonides, is a code of law. It's not a book of prayers or teachings and inspiration. How is it possible that in the middle, smack in the middle of Jewish law, he's talking about, may this be speedily in our day, amen, may this be your will. So I'm reading the last word. The fact that Rambam mentioned the 10th red heifer that will be made by King Mashiach in his legal code is understood. The fact that he says that there were 9 and number 10 will be forthcoming when Mashiach arrives makes sense because it's part of Jewish law. What is difficult to comprehend is why he concludes this law with a prayer. May he be speedily revealed, amen, may this be your will. Surely a legal code is not the place for the author to record his personal emotions and feelings or to lapse into prayerful wishes. Why code of law is saying in the middle, may it be your will and may it happen to us speedily, amen. Says the Rebbe that it can be teaching us three major points. It could be argued, however, that this is that with his prayer, Rambam did teach us a point of Jewish law, or to be precise, 3 points. It's not a wishful prayer. It's not a personal desire, but part of Jewish law that Rambam is imparting upon us. Number 1, Judaism requires a person, A, not merely to believe intellectually in Mashiach, but also to actively await and yearn emotionally for his coming. When he said that, he's saying, teaching us, it's not enough to understand that the world was created for the purpose of the coming of Mashiach, and that God is waiting for Mashiach to arrive. But we have to involve our emotions and desire in our heart, the coming of Mashiach. Number 2, inevitably, filling this void will lead a person to pray for Mashiach coming, just as he prays for any other thing that is lacking in his life. It teaches us, number 2, that if you have any desire, you should pray to God about that. Number 3, and being that the requirement to believe in Mashiach is enforced at all times, it follows that likewise a person must yearn and pray for Mashiach constantly. Because this mitzvah is unusual in the way that it is required upon us to constantly ask for Mashiach anytime, as we say in the Amidah that we recite 3 times a day, Ki lishuatcha, because for your salvation of Mashiach, Chikinu kol hayom, we await all day long, every day. Therefore, any opportunity he has, he's asking for Mashiach to fulfill the mitzvah of awaiting Mashiach. Therefore, 1, Rambam included prayerful wishes here in his legal code to indicate that awaiting Mashiach must not be only expressed intellectually, but emotionally too. Number 2, he stresses that Mashiach should come speedily to indicate Mashiach's coming should be a personal, heartfelt desire. And number 3, he recorded the above principle not in his codification of the laws concerning Mashiach, but here out of context to indicate that one must express a yearning for Mashiach constantly, whatever the context of one's discussion happened to be. Says the Rebbe, by bringing may it be his will and may Mashiach arrive speedily, amen, teaches us that A, it's not only thinking and realizing how good it is, but awaiting and involving our emotions.
Tell Herman I miss him.
Number 2, it is always something that's required all day long. And number 3, that's number 3. I got distracted here. So
I don't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. The next one is I want to talk about is Miriam's demise. We read on chapter 20, verse 1, we read the following. On page 995 in the book, the entire next generation of the congregation of the children of Israel arrived in the desert of Tzin on the first of the month. First of the month is the first of Nisan. And the people settled in Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. We read about Miriam's the demise. She died and she was buried. What's the next text reads? The congregation had no water, so they ganged up against Moshe and Aaron And the people quarreled with Moshe. They spoke up saying, if only we had died in the plague before God with the same death as our brothers, rather than through thirst. Why have you brought us, God's congregation, to this desert so that we should die here? Both us and our animals, and they continue complaining. Immediately after Miriam dies, there is no water and the people are complaining. Rashi says, from here we learn that throughout the 40 years, they had the well in Miriam's merit. Miriam is the one who caused the Jewish people to have water for 40 years in the desert. That's why as soon as she died, the water, the well was gone. And then they come and ganged up against Moshe and Aaron. And God allows Moshe to speak to a rock. And because the rock got mixed up, we'll find out soon why and what happened. He hit the rock, and because of that, he was not granted permission to enter the Holy Land, and he had to die and be buried in the desert. It's all in this week's portion. So it all started from the fact that Miriam had died. So now the well is gone. Does Miriam well still exist? The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, the first Lubavitch Rebbe in the Code of Law, tells us the following. A few have the custom to draw water every Motzei Shabbat, every Saturday night, from wells or springs, because the well of Miriam passes through all the wells every Saturday night. Whoever finds it and drinks from it will be healed from all his illness. The Alter Rebbe Code of Law tells us that there are some people, some groups, who have a tradition that on Saturday night they go down to the well and they draw water and drink from it. Why? Because Miriam's well did not go nowhere. It left the desert, but it travels all across the globe. And on Saturday night, it gets mixed up with all the wells around. And if someone gets lucky enough to drink from the well, from water that belongs to the well of Miriam, they will get cured. They'll be healed from anything they need. I would like to share with you the Kabbalistic understanding of Miriam's well. Well provides water. Water plays a very, very vital part in our sustenance. In fact, a person can live for a long time without food, but not without liquid. They must have water. So the following is the Hasidic understanding of Miriam's well in general and the word water. How does water translate in spirituality? I'm reading it from the text because I think it's self-understood. Water says this is the Rebbe in a talk that he spoke. Water assists the digestive system to break down food, and the water within the bloodstream carries those nutrients to all parts of the body. Water has a vital purpose in taking around, in driving around all the nutrients within the body and taking the food and allowing it to get into the bloodstream. This represents the mission of all Jewish women. In essence, in a spiritual sense, just like the water functions in our body, so are the Jewish women. To bring the well of living water, Torah is called living water, providing sustenance and life spiritually to the soul. And that's the purpose of the Torah, to nourish all segments of the Jewish people, even those who totally lack knowledge of it. Thus, we find that while still in Egypt, Miriam devoted herself to small children, and her heroic efforts led to the annulment of the Pharaoh's decree against children. Consequently, it was in her merit that the well water came, since water represents the universal dissemination of Torah. Says the Rebbe, if you look at Miriam's life, you will find that her job, in a spiritual sense, was exactly the same as what the water does in the functioning of the body. In the body, it allows for the nutrients to travel within the blood all over the body. The Torah, living Torah spirituality, is penetrating and bringing energy and life and nutrients to the soul and the human being. Miriam, as a youngster, was there encouraging people to continue life and to raise children and to teach them proper behavior. Thus, in her life, she embodied what spiritual water are. Thus, few more points. When a mother, sister, or teacher educate a child, we witness the modern day living waters of Miriam, sustaining the Jewish people in exile, making it possible to go peacefully throughout the current sojourn of the desert of exile. Anytime you have a mother, a teacher, a young sister, a girl, teaches Torah, what they do is they bring the well of spirituality and spreading it around, providing nutrients and sustenance to the people. In addition to providing water to drink, Miriam's well also made it possible for the mitzvah of Taharat HaMishpacha, or family purity, to be fulfilled. Why? There was no other source of water in the desert. So Miriam's well served as a mikveh in addition to drinking, enabling children to be born throughout the 40 years. In order for a Jewish couple to be able to have children, they must be using the mikveh and fulfilling the mitzvah of family purity. In the desert, the only source, or the only way to go into a mikveh, for someone to get into a mikveh, is Miriam's well. In other words, not only spiritually, but physically, she also enabled the future of the Jewish people to continue through the well of Miriam. The custom, now we go to the custom of Saturday night. Says the Rebbe, the custom of drawing water on Saturday night to draw from the well of Miriam is cited in Shulchan Aruch in Code of Law. This appears to suggest that it is applicable today. However, this was not a custom practiced by the house of Chabad rabbis. In other words, the Chabad custom is not to go out for a well and find water and draw and use it. It certainly applied to all of us spiritually. Studying this law about Miriam's well influences the whole week, that it may be a healthy week in both spiritual and physical terms. Says the Rebbe, you can go to the well of Miriam by studying Torah and teaching others. Thus, you draw spiritual water that will bring healing and uniting people together. So on Saturday night, if you want to get healed, even though it's not our custom to go to the well and draw water, we can take water, spiritual water, and use them in the same way as Miriam did with her well. All right, so with the little time we have, I want to talk about two more things. I hope this is the second portion that we studied this week, Balak. We read about a prophet, a non-Jewish prophet that had similar powers as Moshe. He can speak to God directly. His name is Bilam. And Balak, the king of Moab, is sending messengers to convince him to come and curse the Jewish people. He realized that the Jewish people will not be defeated with might, with a sword and a dagger, but rather through prayer. And therefore, he's looking for someone to curse them verbally using his mouth against the Jewish people. Bilam is asking God. God refuses few times. 3 times God says to him, no, the Jewish people are blessed. But finally, God says to him, you can go to the king, but you will have to speak what I tell you without deviating. He actually ends up not just cursing the Jewish people, but blessing the Jewish people in 3 separate prophecies. He is blessing the Jewish people, and some of his blessings, he prophesies about the coming of Mashiach. He's praising the Jewish people about how blessed they are that God chose them for a reason. And at the end of the portion, just to complete the picture, Bil'am is advising Balak. He says to him, you will not be able to overcome them because God is protecting them. However, God hates misconduct, inappropriate conduct. So if you can send out your girls, sacrifice your young daughters, and send them over to sin with young men, that will prevent them from being protected. And as we read at the end of the portion, unfortunately, Balak is giving over his daughter, his own daughter, and so all the Moabites following and joining by sending their daughters, young daughters, to the Jewish camp, and the young men succumb to the test, and they end up sinning, and God is angry, and a plague breaks until the next week we read about Pinchas, who comes up with a heroic act. He's able to stop the plague. By the time he stops the plague, there are 24,000 young men who are dead. And then God turns to Moshe and says, you have to take revenge of Bilam for causing the demise of 24,000 men. And Bilam is killed during a war. But that's next week's portion. One of the blessings that Bilam is blessing the Jewish people is the following, and those of us who pray morning prayers should be familiar with. And they are on page 1028, chapter 23, verse 20. I'm sorry, chapter 24, verse 5. He said the following: Ma tovu oalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Israel. In the morning prayer, we begin this prayer every morning, and the translation is, "Your tents are so good, O Yaakov, your dwellings, O Israel." He blesses the Jewish people, and he is, so to say, jealous of the Jewish people who are dwelling and living in beautiful tents and dwellings. What is so unique about the Jewish people's dwellings? The following is Rashi. We don't have enough time to get into the details of Rashi's two explanations, so I'm going to stick only to one. Rashi says, because he saw that the entrance were not opposite each other, your dwellings thus refers to your encampments as Onkelos states. And then Rashi gives us another explanation. What Bil'am saw is that what we call in Jewish law, vision damage, evil eye. By Jewish law, I can seek damages and to be paid, compensated, when someone causes a person an evil, casting on another person an evil eye. In Jewish law, a neighbor can restrict his neighbor from opening up a window that enables him to look into his neighbor's home. By Jewish law, when one builds a home, he must build it in a way to create privacy for himself and for his neighbors. So what Bilam saw when he looked over from a mountain at the Jewish camp, he saw that their tents, each family lived in a different tent, yet their tents' entrances were facing different direction so as to never be able to look into someone else's dwelling. Windows were never facing another window or another door, because the Jewish people adore or respect evil eye and the privacy so much so that they can demand, and they actually follow the rules that privacy must be protected. And that's when Bilam turns to Balak and he prophesies a blessing to towards the Jewish people by saying that these people are blessed are your dwellings and your tents, because they kept the respect, they kept respecting one another, and refraining from living in ways that they can see what is in each other's home. And I think this rule is recited every single day. We pray that because it is very, very important to remember that living a life is great, but make sure you do not interfere with other people's life and make sure that you respect their privacy. And this will conclude our lesson for today for lack of time. And I hope that we should be able to hear better news. At this point, I'm not sure I can encourage people to come to synagogue because of the situation that's getting almost out of hand, I would say. So, but at least I want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. At this point, we still have services tomorrow night, 7:30, and Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. But we'll see. Hopefully, things will improve over the next day or two. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.